You're listening to The Unsafe Bible with Pastor Ken Brown.
We're all used to job evaluations. I mean, they happen all the time. And it's all about results. It's what have you achieved this past year for the firm? Or how did you add value to the brand and further the mission of the organization? And all Jesus is interested in is faithfulness and obedience. That's it. That tends to remove everything that we did due to other motivations and limit it to what we do for Jesus and what he's done for us. The thing is, are we just simply being faithful to what he's called us to do, whatever that is?
Every job involves an evaluation, whether it's a formal sit-down with the boss or an informal pop-in from the principal. Every head of a school or business wants to know what results you are producing. But today, Pastor Ken reminds you that Jesus isn't the CEO of a company. Of course, he wants to be faithful with the time and talents he has entrusted with you, but at the end of the day, he accepts you, not what you've produced for him. Be faithful with what he has given you, but rest in his acceptance. Well, let's join Pastor Ken in the book of Zechariah, chapter 7, as he continues his message, Why We Do What We Do When We Do What We Do.
Verse 4, the word of the Lord of armies came to me. So in other words, Zechariah is now called to duty again by the Lord, saying, say to all the people of the land and to the priests, when you fasted and mourned in the 5th and 7th months, because the Lord's going to talk about 2 fasts, these 70 years, was it actually for me that you fasted? And when you eat and drink, do you not eat for yourselves and drink for yourselves? Are these not the words which the Lord proclaimed by the former prophets when Jerusalem was inhabited and carefree along with its cities around it, and the Negev and the foothills were inhabited? So about that question regarding the fast of the 5th month on the destruction of the temple, and the answer from the Lord, he brings in the additional fast dealing with the assassination of Gedaliah. So here's the question, and it's directed to the entire nation. Why are you doing this? That's not a good thing when you're doing something that you think the Lord wants you to do, and he asks, why are you doing this? And that's what he's doing. The Lord's asking that why question, not the people. He's asking them, why are you doing this? And when we see this, when I read this, the first thing I find myself doing is examining my own heart. Why? When the Lord asks, well, it's time to check what's my motivation when I do something. Why am I doing anything that I do? If he's asking them why, I need to ask myself why too. Why do I do what I do when I do what I do for the Lord? What is it? Why do we serve the Lord where we're serving him? Why do we give to the Lord? Why do we even worship or come to the church? I mean, where is our motivation? Because trust me, I've interviewed a lot of people whose motivation is to be seen or to get a tax deduction or you name it, and it has nothing to do with worship and it has nothing to do with reaching others for Christ. This is no different than what Paul was talking about in his first letter to the folks in Corinth. Now, if you remember the folks in Corinth, they had serious issues over motivation and over the reasons why certain things should be done. They were into looking good, but they had a lot of confusion over what it meant to be a believer and what you needed to do to be a believer. So in his instructions to them, Paul covers the why from the perspective of the Lord, and he uses an analogy of various building materials and the quality and durability of various material choices. It's in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 11. For God has already placed Jesus Christ as the one and only foundation. So he's saying Christ is the foundation for everything we do and the way that we live. No other foundation can be laid. Now, some will use gold, silver, or precious stones in building on the foundation. In other words, the motivation will be pure. Others will use wood or grass or straw. In other words, the motivation is going to be kind of sketchy. And the quality of each person's work will be seen when the day of Christ, that's the Bema seat, okay? That's not the great white throne judgment. It's when each of us have our own personal job evaluation with Jesus saying, what have you done with your salvation? And it says, on that day, fire will reveal everyone's work. The fire will test it and show its real quality. If what was built on the foundation survives the fire, the builder will receive a reward. But if anyone's work is burnt up, then he'll lose it. But he himself will be saved as though he escaped through the fire. Now, for us as believers, we are all given the same base foundation. It's Jesus Christ. And then it's our choice as to how we want to build on top of that. Now, we can choose to build with durable, precious materials, or we can choose to use expedient ones that just disappear. And we're all given the opportunity to build how we want to. Either our motivation to what we do in serving the Lord is in alignment with Him, and we're doing things to serve Him and to follow Him and to love Him, or we're doing stuff because it makes me look really good. I get a lot of likes if I look just this way on Facebook, or there are people who do this, okay? When we see Christ at the Bema seat, the issue is not salvation. We are saved. That's a settled issue. It's this. Okay, yeah, you're saved. What have you done with it? It's a job evaluation. Let's take a look at the whys that you did things. That's what the Lord's going to do. It's a lot of like what Yahweh is saying here in Zechariah. Why are you fasting? So think of the Bema seat again as a job evaluation by the Lord of all the reasons why you did what you did as a believer. Now, He's not interested in the results. I love that. He doesn't care how many people were saved or how many churches were built or how many chairs you moved or how many cookies you cooked or whatever. He doesn't care. He just wants to know, well, were you being faithful to me when you did it? We're all used to job evaluations. I mean, they happen all the time. And it's all about results. It's what have you achieved this past year for the firm? Or how did you add value to the brand and further the mission of the organization? And all Jesus is interested in is faithfulness and obedience. That's it. That tends to remove everything that we did due to other motivations and limit it to what we do for Jesus and what He's done for us. The thing is, are we just simply being faithful to what He's called us to do, whatever that is? The fire mentioned here, by the way, is not punitive fire. It's not retribution. It's not discipline. It's just testing, okay? The image is of a fire that burns to expose the materials of bad quality by reducing them to ashes while leaving the good materials intact. And the work that's judged is the work of an individual building on the foundation rather than that of personal character. So it's how we live our life and how we follow Him. The distinction is not between lost and saved, but among the saved, between those who built well and those who didn't. And let's put it this way. In the kingdom, there will be a few folks walking around who have a smoky smell about them because there's not a lot left. They put an awful lot of wood, hay, and stubble up there. I mean, I've got wood, hay, and stubble that I know is going to go. Pray that everything that we do from that point forward, and once we get it right for the Lord. There are a lot of people who are going to be there, and they're saved, and they spent their time glorifying themselves and living for themselves, and the Lord's okay with that. It's just they don't get any reward. That was their motivation for service, or giving, or anything else. Here in Zechariah, the Lord's asking the same question. Why do you fast? Why did you fast? Nation of Israel, for the last 70 plus years, why did you even do this? Was it for the Lord? Did they truly fast and pray and repent of the sins that brought them into exile in the first place? Now we know Daniel did that. In Daniel chapter 9, verses 3 to 19, he does this prayer that he doesn't get to finish because some guy named Gabriel interrupts him. But he may have been the exception rather than the rule. When we worship, why do we stand? Why do we lift our hands when we worship and pray? I mean, these are some personal preference kind of questions. Why do we serve where it is we're serving? Why do I stand to teach in front rather than having the stage in the center and everybody be around me, which would be crazy because somebody's always looking at my back and I would feel very uncomfortable. But there is a church that meets in the round. It's in Southern California. I don't know how they do that. I would want to be on a motorized thing that goes around constantly, That's just personal preference again. Some of the whys are personal preference. They have no bearing whatsoever on the work of the Lord. Standing, sitting, kneeling, lying face down on the floor to worship or pray is exactly that. It's personal preference. Now, I can no longer kneel to pray because football's a great sport and I blew out both my knees. There are times, though, where standing to worship's not comfortable because I may have been working all day and all of a sudden my muscles have decided, I'm here. Or sitting may not be comfortable. It just depends. When we worship, should we stand? Should we sit? Should we sing along? Or do we just stand and zone out? I've seen a lot of that lately. People stand and everybody's worshiping around them and they're just kind of like in another location. They're not even engaging. And what that means is it's now turned into a tradition or a formalism kind of a thing. Doesn't matter what they're singing. Doesn't matter whether it's worship using a band or worship using a choir or if it's worship using songs written 500 years ago. It doesn't matter. It's going to be that. It's just a formal thing for them. At Calvary, we don't do any of that right now. We don't have a band. We meet on Sunday mornings in a covered patio venue. Everybody sits at a table. There's not chairs lined up, so that's a little different. There's no worship band. Not that we wouldn't like to have one, but we do play music on the speakers. We study the Bible together, pray, and then go home. And on Thursdays, we meet here in an auditorium. And we have not had a worship band here for at least 13 years. At one time, we did have one. When I first took over the midweek Bible study, about 14 years ago, we were on Wednesday nights. It was a full service. We actually had a band. We had worship. We had the whole thing going on. Don't ask me why all that changed. I had no control over it. But it did. So it was kind of a tradition thing. It was kind of a routine thing. And it's easy to get into, and there's nothing wrong with traditions. There's nothing wrong with routines if we're doing them with the right motivation. Kind of like the ways we worship in church today. Sometimes it feels like a rock concert when you go to worship, and there's nothing wrong with that. I still struggle with the fog machines, but that's okay. I'll get over it. I like being led to the throne room of God, and that can happen in that environment, not a problem. And to worship and adore Him together, that's what we do. That's what worship's all about. But again, what's our motivation? Why are we doing it? It doesn't matter what it looks like. Trust me, I like concerts. I have performed my share of them because I thought I was going to be a musician at one time. But I found out you can't make a living playing the harpsichord. Nobody wants to hear it. I don't know why, but they don't. And I also remember being told that worship is only worship when the songs are at least 100 years old. Yes, I've been told that. The church I was saved in told me that. Because we were putting a band together to play music, and we had guitars and drums and the whole 9 yards. But they wanted 4-part harmony, and we weren't singing 4-part harmony. And by the way, if you study music history, when they went from Gregorian chant to 4-part harmony, they thought 4-part harmony was the tool of the devil because it wasn't Gregorian chant. Worship wars are nothing new. I also heard when I was younger, drums are of the devil. They aren't. Some of the drummers are, I think, but the drums aren't. And guitars should be seen and never heard, even though David played one. He played. But God says to us, why are you doing this to begin with? What's your motivation? Why are you doing it? Here's the thing. The danger of any religious tradition, whether it's keeping a fast or singing a certain song or praying with certain words, because there are some people who pray the Lord's Prayer and you can tell that they are loving the Lord as they do it. And there are others who pray the Lord's Prayer where it's kind of like, okay, you've done this 35 times too many. It can degenerate into traditionalism, and that's what we don't want it to turn into. We don't want it to turn into, well, it's 'cause. We're doing this 'cause, that's why we do it. I used to work in the world of insurance where everything is 'cause, and you ask that question, why are you doing it this way? And well, we've done it that way since the standard fire policy was issued after the Chicago fire, and we're never going to change it. Yeah, okay. It's 'cause. God is asking the people, did you do this to honor me, or is it because you feel sorry for yourselves and what you lost? That's the real motivation as to why they've been fasting for 70 years. The question from the Lord is a repeat of what he had asked earlier in Isaiah chapter 1, verses 11 to 17, Hosea 6, and in Amos 5. At the moment this one's being asked, God is blessing his people. They've returned to the land. It's the remnant. The temple's being rebuilt. The situation continues to improve every day. It's wonderful out there. And he rebukes them for fasting and for feasting when you don't have your heart in the right place, accusing them of being no better than they were prior to being exiled. Verse 8, then the word of the Lord came to Zechariah saying, this is what the Lord of armies has said. Dispense true justice and practice kindness and compassion. So in other words, what the Lord's saying is, let's tell them what the word was back when they had it all wrong and they were also worshiping idols. This is what the Lord of armies has said, dispense true justice, practice kindness and compassion, each to his brother, and do not oppress the widow or the orphan, the stranger or the poor, and do not devise evil in your hearts against one another. But they refused to pay attention and turned a stubborn shoulder and plugged their ears from hearing. They also made their hearts as hard as a diamond, so they could not hear the law and the words which the Lord of armies had sent by his Spirit through the former prophets. Therefore great wrath came from the Lord of armies, and just as he called, and they would not listen, so they called, and I would not listen, says the Lord of armies. But I scattered them with a storm wind among all the nations, whom they did not know, since the land was desolated behind them, so that no one went back and forth, since they made the pleasant land desolate. What he's saying is, you weren't there when this message first went to your ancestors, okay? They had a problem differentiating between ritual and relationship too. The problem is they kind of resolved it the wrong way. So let me tell you what I told them. The bottom line is this. When the heart is wrong, the ritual, the tradition, whatever it is, doesn't matter, it's wrong. The folks who came from Bethel, remember that, were interested in the future. They're not interested in the past. But to understand the present, the Lord takes them to the past, which is the key to the future. They have to understand all of it, and the Lord's going to make sure they do. Here's what Yahweh told your ancestors through the prophets. Dispense true justice and practice kindness and compassion, each to his brother, and do not oppress the widow or the orphan, the stranger or the poor, and do not devise evil in your hearts against one another. This is a recall of the message given to the northern and the southern kingdoms prior to them going into exile. They were told this, and they ignored it. Yahweh first shows them what true justice looks like. They know, by the way, these folks from Bethel, they already know this. They know they went into exile due to sin. They know that true justice was not something being done in the past. True justice points to legal judgments that are in line with truth or faithfulness. But there was a temptation for the rich to manipulate the court system to their own advantage. Of course, we don't have that in this country. The prophet challenges those responsible for judgment to follow the core values expressed in the Torah, one that abounds in truth and faithfulness. Now, in our study of the minor prophets, all of them railed against the injustice taking place in the culture of their day in both kingdoms. And as we learned, they all were talking about our country too. There's no difference between the culture of the northern kingdom or the southern kingdom and what's going on in our culture today. By bringing this back up, the Lord is not only reminding them of the why of the exile, something they've already acknowledged. The folks from Bethel have acknowledged it in their language as they approach the Lord. But he's warning them about the dangers that they're going to have going forward. There's going to be some issues that they need to be ready for. The temple's being rebuilt. Things are going well. God is indeed blessing. But he knows their hearts, and there is a danger there. So this is not simply a history lesson to remind them of why they are where they are. It's a warning that is relevant for the present, for them and for us. Verse 9, this is what the Lord of armies has said, dispense true justice and practice kindness and compassion, each to his brother, and do not oppress the widow or the orphan, the stranger or the poor, and do not devise evil in your hearts against one another. This is relevant then, it's relevant now, it's relevant for us today. Because what he does in that simple statement is Yahweh restates the Big Ten, and then he adds another item to it. So when he says dispense true judgment, he says you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. That's part of the Ten Commandments. When he says practice kindness and compassion each to his brother, Well, to practice kindness and compassion means you don't kill them. So you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not covet anything that's your neighbor's. That's practicing kindness and compassion. Do not oppress the widow or the orphan or the stranger or the poor. Well, if you're doing that, it's because you've made something else your God. So that's that you shall have no other gods before me, period. It's not about money, it's about following the Lord. You shall not make yourself the carved image or any likeness of anything that's in heaven. Well, when they were doing that, it was a gold calf down the street. You shall not take the name of your Lord in vain. They were doing that. And then he says, do not devise evil in your hearts against one another. He's taking them back to the book of Leviticus, where they are told, as a people, you shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. It's that simple. And they weren't doing it. He's saying, that's what you got to look out for. You need to follow what the law says. What he's saying is ritual on Saturday, or for us, ritual on Sunday, it's okay if your heart's right. I mean, if you like seeing the guy walk up and down the aisle with a thing of incense and it really makes you one with the Lord, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. I always look at it and say, is he going right to left or left to right? My heart's not in the right place with that. But if your heart's right, the ritual's right, okay? It's nothing but an exhibition of love flowing from an obedient heart. If your heart's right, then the way that you live Sunday through Friday or Monday through Saturday is right, because in light of your relationship, your heart is right, your relationships with others is right, everything's the way it should be. So this is a warning to the nation that if you don't have your heart right, then it's just ritual. It doesn't mean anything. You're not doing exactly what the Lord would have you to do. He's okay with ritual, but make sure your heart's right. Now, the prophets were rejected in the past, and he's saying, don't be like your ancestors. Now, we see the same today. We see a lot of people who appear at church, but they don't really listen to what's being said. I mean, this is showing up in research, unfortunately. George Barna did a survey this year, taking a look at the difference between folks pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, just a 3-year period. And what he found out is those people who say they're born again, okay, that's just those who say that they've given their life to Jesus, only 50% are committed to practicing their faith. I don't understand that. And only 55% read or study the Bible at least once a week. I'm going like, really? I mean, I don't get it. Every church today, no matter how faithful and biblically oriented it is struggling against two things. It's struggling against Laodicea and Jezebel. That's Satan's attack, and it's pretty common. And that's where it's showing up. And we see that in the book of Revelation. We see that's even an attack. And it's in every church. It doesn't matter. That's the pressure that we get these days. Let me give you a graphic example. Over the last decade in this study, okay, when we were part of the overall ministry of Calvary Jupiter, the church had only, when it first started, we had about 350, 400 people coming on Sunday. And now we're at 1,600. So how many people wanted to go further with the word? Now the standard at that time, and it still is for a lot of churches, is that the number that you get on Sunday, for Bible study, you'll get about 10%. That's usually the number. That's never been the case. It's about 4%. In talking to other brothers in other Calvary chapels, that's not unusual anymore. It's usually about 4 to 5%.
Thanks for joining us today here on the Unsafe Bible. This program is a ministry of Calvary Chapel, Martin County in Hobe Sound, Florida. Pastor Ken Brown has been leading us in a study through the Old Testament book of Zechariah. As we've studied this text verse by verse, we see many references to the Messianic kingdom that is being founded here on earth. The prophet Zechariah is all too aware of how different earthly kingdoms will fight against each other for dominance, leaving death and destruction in their wake. But the Messianic kingdom to come will be the end of human suffering, and those who sinned against God will face justice for the evil doings they've done. This isn't just a story we read about in some book. It is the Word of God, and the prophecies we read in this book are for things that have yet to fully happen in our world. Well, if you'd like to be a part of the kingdom of justice, we'd love to tell you more about what it means to follow Jesus and gain that kingdom citizenship. Just visit us online at theunsafebible.com and navigate to our Connect tab. You'll also find more messages from Pastor Ken, which should help you grow and mature in your faith. And also, there are in-person service opportunities at Calvary Chapel, Martin County. Well, Pastor Ken is going to continue teaching verse by verse through Zechariah in the next edition of the Unsafe Bible. We'd like to thank you for joining us for today's program and for spending a short time in the Word of God. Until next time, this has been the latest edition of the Unsafe Bible.